Hi, good evening. Welcome to our 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central webinar entitled Difficult Patient Conversations. You're in the right place. I'm not Teresa Duncan, as you can tell. This is Jim Gerson from CareStack. I'm your housekeeper for the evening. Let's put it that way, I guess. Now I'm going to turn it over to Teresa. And this is a second installment of our series, The Wild World of Management. Hopefully you joined us a couple weeks ago when Lynn Leggett presented. Teresa is the facilitator and she's the contributor tonight. So we're thrilled to have her. I don't want to butcher the introduction. So Teresa, I'm going to allow you to do your intro, but hopefully she's a familiar face and voice to most of you. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Jim. All right, we are here to talk about difficult patient conversations. You can see on the screen, my book is Moving Your Patients to Yes, Easy Insurance Conversations. And because of all of the weird conversations, all of the crazy conversations that I've had with patients, then I can tell you that this is a labor of love. So we're going to give away 2 of those books. And a little bit about me before we get started. I have been in the dental field for almost 30 years. I have worked in all of the different positions that don't require a license. So insurance coordinator, sterilization tech, dental assistant, and receptionist, office manager, insurance coordinator, financial coordinator, all of it. And what I can tell you is that I am blessed to be in this industry, absolutely love this industry, and I am trying to take everything I have and distill it down to you. The one thing that I can tell you is that I teach a lot of insurance, and in the insurance conversations or in all my insurance classes, what I hear the most is how do I handle angry patients, upset patients, insurance-driven patients, people that don't have money, people that want to not spend money, just only want to get what their benefits allow. What about the people who come at me with these questions that no one told me that I would even have to handle? And so that's why I wanted to really do this conversation, this webinar, so that you would understand, have some tips, some conversation foundations, and have really a game plan of how you can discuss this with your staff. What I'd really like for you to do is take all of this information that I'm going to give to you, and you'll have the handouts, go back and have a meeting with your team, come up with some of your own wacky situations and role play this information. And it's much easier when you practice it. The worst time to practice new conversations is when you have the patient in front of you. So practice it before the patient gets there. And if you have a supportive team, this can really be a great team building exercise. So I wanted to give you some best practices though, because I can give you all of the conversations, I can give you all of the scripts, and this webinar is nothing but scripts. So you're going to see nothing but scripts on here. What I need you to do, though, is understand that there has to be a time and a place for these conversations. Now, most of the time, of course, the patient's going to set the time. It's when they want to talk to you. But I need you to keep in mind the place. So if you're in your office and you've got other patients around or coming and going, it's really important that you maintain privacy, whether you move to a place where no one else can really hear what you have to say, and to keep your voice low. There's another reason I say keep your voice low is even if a patient is escalating in their conversation with you, if you can keep your voice down, it doesn't escalate any further. Patients typically will continue to go higher and higher if you go along with them. And so be careful with how you, I guess, play into the heat of the moment, because believe me, you can get really angry at patients. And I have definitely, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I have definitely lost my cool with some patients. It does take some time to get really good with that. It takes maturity, it takes experience, but there are some patients that know exactly how to push your buttons. I get it. I see Jim launched a poll, and so what he's asking is, what role do you play in the practice? So go ahead and fill that in when you get a chance. And Jim, just let me know when you want to announce the.
Sure. And it's anonymous, by the way. I just want to make sure everyone's aware. We're not going to post this with your name and email address. Teresa, I think we've had it up for about a minute. Do you mind if I give you the results?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so we've got about 50% office managers, and then and then about 20% insurance manager or coordinator, and then equally distributed between hygienists, dental assistants, and dentists as a remainder portion.
Ooh, I love having clinical in here. Good. You're going to be excellent with these conversations. So I'm so glad you're here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get this off the screen if that's okay, Jim.
Sure, I'll end the poll here.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. All right. Now, the other thing to remember is that you can always pick up the conversation later. So if you feel like you're losing control of the conversation, it's okay. You can certainly tell the patient, look, I need to gather more information. Let me look into it a little bit more. Even if you have all the facts, you just need a break because the conversation's not going in the right direction. That's okay. Tell them that you will contact them the next day. But again, customer service point, you definitely have to do this. I also think that it's very important that we at the admin side, and even if this happens on the clinical side, we need to document the conversation and we need to actually put in direct quotes into the patient record. If the conversations are difficult, if they are uncomfortable, this is even more important because if you don't have this information in the chart and for some reason it goes legal, it's hard to defend yourself against this. And so this is just like documentation for the clinical side, only the admin side, we need to be better about documenting patient conversations such as this, especially if they do impact the patient's decision on whether or not to seek treatment. Those indeed, to me, are clinical notes. And also take some of the situations here, but even you might have some situations that are only happen in your office. Maybe you have anesthesia, so you have anesthesia related questions. Maybe you are a prosthetic office, so you have prosthetic related questions. Every monthly meeting, come up with at least 1 to 2 scenarios where a patient is difficult or, a past situation, and then brainstorm the conversation so that you'll all be ready. This is like a muscle. You have to really keep up with this because I know patients are great. And 99% of the time, it's really not an issue. However, there's always going to be that 1%. And remember, that 1% is going to blow up your whole team. It's going to really upset the whole dynamic and you're going to get heartburn. So I don't want that to happen. All right, let's move on to the next slides and let's go into some of the real talk about conversations here. So first of all, you should know patients definitely hate surprise bills. And many of the complaints and Yelp reviews that you'll see, Google reviews, have to do with the fact that patients received a bill that they were not ready for. So we're going to have some financial conversations. Goals, confidence, and clarity. I want you to be able to say what you need to say with confidence. And the clarity part comes the more you role play. That's why it's important for you to practice these conversations because you may think that you're speaking clearly, but what you're actually saying comes out totally different. So it's really important to practice over and over again. There are certain phrases that we are all good at using. When you're a good communicator, you use these phrases because it really makes the conversation inclusive. It lets the patient know that you're clued into what it is that they are concerned with. You're empathetic. Here's what I'm talking about. We are seeing that this is happening to other patients. We have found that other patients with this insurance carrier are having some issues. I've worked with many plans like yours, and what I have found is many patients need help with financing. You're not alone. Do you see how all of those phrases were meant to put the patient at ease? And that's what I'm talking about. So use inclusive phrases so that the patient, first of all, is put at ease. Second of all, though, it sounds like you've been doing this a long time and it sounds like you know what you're doing. You probably do. But for those of you who are still a little uncertain, this helps you become very confident. And so that's what we want to get across to the patient is that they're in good hands and you're going to help them out. Now, I wanted to also, let's take a step back from the office and let's look at the messaging that the patients are going to see on your website. And so this is where it starts. I want you to have good messaging and set the tone for good conversations before the patient even comes to your office. If you have comments such as these, we're happy to talk with you about your plan. Our team handles multiple carriers a day. We take pride in helping our patients interpret their benefits. Click here to send us a message. You can see if you're using third-party financing, you would have even a link to third-party financing. And then that bottom one, if you're not sure how your plan works in our office, let us find out for you. Click here or call the office. You're already setting the tone that you're a helpful office and that you're going to go above and beyond to give that good customer service. And nowadays, we all know that customer service is that's what driving patient choice nowadays. And so take a look at your website messaging and see if that is coming across. Okay. And sometimes what I find is people will email me and say, you know what, I'm glad you said that because I haven't looked at my website in like 10 years. I mean, some of you have had websites for that long, right? So it's time to take a look at the copy on the website. I do recommend looking at that at least once a year because things change. Either your carrier changes or maybe your staff changes. You've got some changes that happen a lot. Some other conversations that I want you to keep in mind. We're going to talk about some clinical conversations, and we're also going to talk about some just random financial conversations. But one thing that you should know, if you have not been doing this for very long, if you're newer to dentistry, some of the insurance conversations center around the fact that the cost of insurance and the cost of the co-insurance has been going up. And so patients nowadays are finding that they have more out-of-pocket expense than ever before. That's a problem. It's something that we certainly didn't expect, but it definitely is an issue, and you're going to have to talk about it with patients. So deductibles have slowly been going up. We've been noticing that. Sometimes you will have a deductible that is at $75 or $100 per person, and that's up from the regular 25 or 50. And so many times patients don't even realize that until they get into your office. Same thing with their yearly benefit. Sometimes they don't realize it's only $1,000. Sometimes they think that they have unlimited benefits, and that's because perhaps the messaging wasn't good from the employer. Now, the patients that have not used insurance before, dental insurance before, tend to see it as the same as medical insurance and that most of it's covered. So there is an education that we have to have when we talk to our patients. I also want you to keep in mind that some of the things we say impact how patients think. For example, we don't want to call it a maximum. I like you to call it a yearly benefit. And the reason being is that maximum implies a stopping point. So anytime a patient hears you say, well, we're going to reach your maximum, what they initially are going to think is, oh, I better stop because it's non-covered from here on out. It's going to get really expensive. So I want you to just change a little bit. It's little tweaks like that to your conversation that I think help out a lot. Okay, so let's talk about the waiting periods and the benefits that the benefit limitations that we find. So I gave you some sample conversations here, and again, try these out. You're not going to sound like I do. I didn't even sound like I do. I was terrible at this when I first started, but I'm giving you the bones of the conversation. And then that way, when you go back and handle it, you'll be giving it your flavor. But always remember, say it with a smile. Of course, you have to say it with a smile, and you have to mean it. And the confidence is where this really comes into play. And so, Mrs. Jones, when we say, for example, we have a waiting period that we run into, and waiting periods, if a patient has work done and there's a waiting period attached, there are no benefits for that particular procedure. And so that becomes very problematic. And so, Mrs. Jones, sometimes employers choose plans with waiting periods to keep their costs low. Unfortunately, it looks like you have one of those plans. Now, I can say this with a smile, but it's not going to be fun for Mrs. Jones to hear. However, I'm not going to sugarcoat, and neither should you. I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that the plans sometimes that these patients come in with are just not very beneficial. You'll see that when we get to the secondary insurance conversations. But we do need to get the point across to them that this is not us. This is an employer situation. This is one of the choices that they made. And so again, unfortunately, Mrs. Jones, it looks like you have one of those plans. So another one is we've seen this happening over time. Lots of plans are starting to apply the deductible to everything, including your preventive visits. Well, a lot of times that's true. Now we're seeing more and more that deductibles are applying to preventive visits rather than just the restorative or the crowns and bridges or the extractions. And patients think that they come in for their free cleanings and then they don't get their free cleanings. They have to pay a deductible. And so that's kind of a shock for them. One of the most important, one of the more advanced jobs that an insurance coordinator can do is reaching out to the human resources departments when the patients are confused about their benefits. And perhaps they can kind of give the HR department a heads up that, hey, this plan is not that great. Maybe I can help you with that. Now, you have to put the offer out, right? So if you're feeling very comfortable, I don't advise doing this if you're brand new to the game and you're really unsure of yourself. But if you're an advanced level, and I saw some of the names on here, you certainly are advanced level when it comes to this, definitely put out the offer. Hey, I'm happy to talk with your HR department about benefits. Maybe I can help them when they select them for next year. Then you can take a look at the benefits and hopefully influence them.
Hey, Teresa, can I interrupt for a second? We've got a
Yes.
lot of traffic in the chat about the link.
Okay.
It looks like the link is broken. I tried loading it myself and it doesn't work for your
Oh,
downloads.
no. Okay.
So everybody here, if the QR code works, because we tried it before the meeting, and the last 2 slides, Teresa will show the QR code again. So her follow-up materials will be in that QR code. I don't know if you want to. I don't
Want me
know,
to put it up
Teresa.
on the screen?
Yeah, I feel like everyone's so hungry for it. They're like ravenous for your link.
All right, let me go back.
Insatiable demand here, and yeah.
There
So
we
take
go.
your cameras out, everybody.
There we go.
There you go, and scan that QR code. We'll give it 10 seconds, and then tough noogies. You got to wait to the end, right, Teresa? And we'll put it back up there.
Yeah. And if you can, if you were able to access it, Jim, and you have the direct drive, the Google Drive link, feel free to pop that in too. That should work. I just used a link shortener.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Let me take a pic. Go back there for 1 second. I'll take a picture of it too. Okay. Thank you. Go for it.
Got it. All right. No, thanks for letting me know. I never want to have people that are like not able to get what they need to during the conversation. So, okay, let's go ahead and then.
And Teresa, let's look at this when we're done. I can't get, if anyone else can get the QR code to work, it's not working on my end.
Oh my goodness.
So maybe it's that first one. Maybe the second slide's a little bit different.
Okay, so the first one is the better one?
No, go back to it's not working for anyone either, the QR code.
Is that one working?
Try this one here. Maybe if you just want to send me the long link and then I'll post it in the chat.
Yeah, let me do that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Let me, I'm just gonna pause the share though. Is it paused? I can't tell.
It says giveaway for 2 attendees. Yep.
Yep, let me, okay. I'm just trying, oh, there we go, pause share. All right, let me get out and get you the link. I know some of the ladies on this call, they're going to want this link.
They'll come and visit me in my house and bang the door down if we don't give them the right link. So I don't want that to happen.
I get it. I get it. So really though, the one thing that I want everybody to know is that there is that importance of the practicing. So I'm glad that I can at least talk about that. Definitely make sure that you have this put into a team meeting. You guys have all of your team meetings on a regular basis. Make sure that you add in some of the situations that I'm giving to you. And let me get this link here.
And so we're still stuck on your giveaway for 2 attendees. I didn't mean to hold you up.
No. I'm talking. Okay. Share.
I can't multitask for sure. So I'm impressed if you can pull it off.
I can. Can you see it there?
Yes, you just hit copy.
Okay. Let me just put that in there. Oh, nope. You know what? It gave me. It gave me the wrong thing here. Okay.
We can come back to this at the end if you want, Teresa.
No,
there you go.
I just got it. Just got it. Okay. See if that works, Jim.
Yeah, it takes me to a PDF that's loading. Okay, go back to your program.
All right.
Give it a second.
Okay. All right. And I think, can you see the screens changing?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're good. Okay. So the next part, let's go ahead and hustle back in now. How much does my insurance cover? This is going to be the big question. And this isn't even the most uncommon question that you're going to get. Most of the time it's, are you in my network? And that's a whole different conversation. Really need more than an hour to tackle that. So I figured let's talk about the ones where the patient's in front of you and asking you questions. So how much does my insurance cover? Well, your benefit, remember your benefit, not your maximum, but your benefit is what you're going to say. Your benefit for the year is $1,500. And if we back this out, total of your treatment costs, then your total will be. Now, again, you're not sugarcoating, and that's the situation. What you'll often hear is, I thought it covered more than that. Well, then you can reply with, well, I would have thought so too, but when we checked your benefits, it turns out that they're not as generous as I thought they would be. Now, that's okay to say because, quite frankly, aren't we always surprised when we look at somebody's benefits and they're not as great as they could be? That's what I'm talking about. We really need to be very honest and firm with patients, but we're not going to sugarcoat anything. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with your benefits, but we found that we're pretty close with our estimates. And keep in mind that some plans have clauses that we're unaware of in the beginning. But if that happens, I'm going to make sure that you know about it as soon as I know about it. Now, I didn't stick exactly to the script because I've been doing this a long time and I can't help it. I kind of ad lib, but you've got, again, the bones of the conversation on the screen. But really what I'm getting across to them is, I'm not sure how familiar you are with your benefits. That part is, I know that you don't know as much about your benefits as I do. So I'm reaffirming that I am aware that they're not very comfortable with their own benefits, which they're not. They're looking to us for help. Then I'm going to reinforce with some confidence, we have found that we're pretty close with our estimates. I'm going to let you know if we're not completely accurate on this, which you're going to do that anyways. So let's get on then to the secondary insurance conversations. This is a problem. I don't think I'm telling anybody anything new. This is a problem. Secondary insurance is an issue that we all run into. So I'm going to give you the most common scripts that I use. You know, Mrs. Smith, for years, when you had two plans, it was pretty much guaranteed that you didn't have anything out of pocket, but things have changed so much. So do you see how I said that? I acknowledge that that's what they thought. It's going to be nothing out of pocket, but I also needed to break reality to them. And that is the case. It's not often when somebody truly does have a completely zero out of pocket with secondary insurance. More and more you have non-duplication of benefit clauses where they don't cover they don't cover anything until the primary is maxed out. So Mrs. Smith, even though you have dual coverage, we found that even with that, not everything is going to be covered. We're finding, Mrs. Smith, that both plans don't cover as much as they used to. What we can do is try again to estimate as much as we can so that we can give you an idea of what your out of pocket is going to be. If you have the benefit booklet, you can bring those in. I'm happy to take a look at it for you. The reason why I'm asking for that is because patients don't know how to look for the non-duplication of benefits wording. Now, hopefully, if you're getting a rundown of benefits, you can find that under the coordination of benefits section. It will tell you how they're going to coordinate. But even so, a lot of times there's a lot more information in the patient's benefit booklet regarding secondary insurance than just on the benefit breakdown. Typically, the benefit breakdown will just tell you how they calculate it. In the benefits booklet, they sometimes give you examples, and that's very, very helpful for you to become more confident with dealing with secondary insurance. Okay, let's talk about some clinical clauses that we run into. So some common clauses with this is we have missing tooth clauses that we come across, and those surprise everybody. A lot of times people don't know that there's usually a 5 or 10 year replacement clause for the crowns. Frequency limitations are now in place for so many things like radiographs. I mean, I'm seeing limitations on bite wings. If you take a 4 bite wings or 2 bite wings in 1 year, then any PAs following that are considered to be part of the bite wing set, which doesn't make much sense to me, but that's how they determine benefits, right? Crazy stuff. Downgrades and bundles, meaning what about composite fillings? They're going to get downgraded to silver fillings. What about implants? They're going to get downgraded to partial dentures. So these are the common clauses that you, as an insurance coordinator, financial coordinator, and clinician presenting treatment should be aware of, because these are the clauses that will trip you up when you estimate costs. Now, so let me give you some conversations around that. Now, say the patient has a missing tooth clause. This is pretty simple for us to understand, but a lot of times they don't get it. So we have to explain it. And again, I take that on because I like to be the translator for the patient. That's how I see myself as the insurance coordinator. So your plan has a missing tooth clause. Unfortunately, this is pretty common, and it's very common. Because your tooth was missing prior to your effective date, unfortunately, the insurance carrier is not going to cover anything replacing that tooth. Your employer has chosen what they call a missing tooth clause, where they don't pay out to replace any teeth that were missing prior to coverage. You see how I went ahead and turned that around so that it's not us, it's the carrier and it's the employer. So feel free to say that, because you're not lying. You're absolutely not lying. And this is part of patient education, and you're being honest. And this is what patients need. They need to understand their benefits a lot better. So the doctors recommended that we take a full set of radiographs today. Your plan covers one every 5 years, but we like to do the 3-year mark here with you based of course on the doctor's recommendation. The doctor feels that 5 years is too long of an interval and she would like to do it sooner. Mrs. Smith, Dr. Ford has taken a look and, we've been watching that tooth on your upper right for a long time. And now you've got issues on the lower right. So I know that your carrier is only going to benefit it every 5 years, but I really think that we need to take it every 3 years. And so this is part of not letting insurance dictate your treatment, which becomes very, very easy to do. And I think a lot of doctors sometimes don't even realize that they're doing it. So check your conversations. Are you making those accommodations because of a patient's benefits? Not cool. It's not practice the way you want to practice and then let the benefits fall where they may. That is the way it's supposed to go. Your policy covers replacements of crowns once every 10 years. I know it's only been 8 years, but unfortunately, it's not going to be covered. However, we'll send in the documentation and hopefully, you'll get some benefit for it. But in our experience, we have found, see, I'm using those terms, we have found that they'll likely deny it. Now, Dr. Ford has indicated that the crown really needs to be replaced soon. And if you waited another 2 years to access benefits for that, it might be too late for the tooth. There is no lie in there. You're being brutally honest, and the patient now has to make a decision, and hopefully they make the right decision. Now, what I'm saying to them is that, yes, we acknowledge that you have a 10-year replacement clause. We can't do anything about it because the carrier has this in place, because your employer has selected it. You see how you're working it backwards in the conversations. So if you need to listen to this webinar again and work through this sequence in your mind along with the notes, feel free to do that again. Being really excellent at conversations, again, takes practice. I certainly would have needed to watch webinar over and over again. Okay. So don't be embarrassed to have to do that. Here is a conversation specifically around 4346, and that is the code where you have inflammation. There's no bone loss. Right? So it's not going to show up on the radiographs, but the patient is what I call puffy. They're puffy. There's inflammation present. It's generalized through the whole mouth. And so sometimes patients get very angry because they think they're coming in for a cleaning and you're telling them, no, I can't really do that. I got to do something different. And so there's really nothing you could have done because you can't diagnose them on the phone, obviously. So you have to stop and have this difficult conversation in person. So Mrs. Smith, this is the doctor saying this, right? After reviewing your information, having a really good look at your mouth and taking a look at the periodontal probings, it looks like we're going to need to handle the inflammation and bleeding before we can move forward with any treatment. In my experience, what I have seen is that if we don't address this now, it's only going to get worse. We won't be able to do what we consider to be a preventive treatment, that's your prophy, because we need to address the puffiness and the inflammation that's going on right now. So again, we're being brutally honest, but we're also we need to be, right? Because it's a disease state that the patient's in. Could be a temporary disease state, but it's definitely something that we need to address. We're catching this early. Right now, you don't have any bone loss, and that means it's just the puffiness and the bleeding that we'll need to treat. Maybe you'll need to explain bone loss. A lot of people don't understand that. So if you just say to them, it's just the gums right now and the puffiness and bleeding, let's get that fixed before we move on. This procedure will help with that. And if you're able to keep this up at home, then we may not need to ever worry about it again. And that's usually the truth. A lot of times you have this puffiness because of medication or because pregnancy, for one thing. You may have some hormonal changes. So not going to get clinical on this, but you will need to stop what you're doing and have this conversation. So some common clauses that you're going to run into. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you should know that these are common clauses. That doesn't mean that you adjust how you do your perio. It just means that you should be aware that these are some of the limitations that are out there. And so when we get to perio, people really, a crown makes sense to them. It's kind of weird. Crown makes sense to them. They feel a crack. They can see a crack in the tooth. They can feel the sharpness with their tongue. But if someone develops periodontal disease over time, they get used to the bleeding. They get used to the funky smell. They get used to it. And so sometimes you get a little bit more resistance around periodontal treatment than you do on actual restorative treatment, which is always always confused me, but you know what? It makes sense when you step back and look at it. So when I talk about periodontal treatment and the financial conversations that go along with it, what we're finding with these plans is that they're paying less for higher levels of disease. And that is true. You have seen this in all of the plan designs. A lot of times periodontal disease treatment is not at 80%. Sometimes you'll see it at 50%. We now have seen the resurgence of what we call the periodontal lifetime maximum. We used to not have that. It was common years ago, and it's now coming back. So you will see that a lot of times it's getting harder and harder to get your perio claims paid. Many of you tell me this in classes, 5mm pockets. Why don't they pay 5mm pockets? I don't know, but they're getting more difficult. I agree with you on that. The doctor doesn't want to wait until it gets worse to treat it. And so we'd like to go ahead and proceed with treatment. I'm happy to send in a pre-treatment estimate if they want one. I'm not going to fight them on that because honestly, it's their right to request it. So why not send it in? And it might make you feel more comfortable too with having that conversation with them. I may need your help to get the claims paid. Now, I always, when it comes to perio claims, I always get the patient involved because I do anticipate issues. And so I say to them, I'm going to send in all the information that they need. If I call you to get help, it's because I have done everything that I can on my end. I'm going to need you to, pick up the phone and call them and let them know that this, you did need the treatment. You might need to go to HR. Now, the reason I do that is because when I do call them, put up the bat signal, I like to call it. When I put up the bat signal, that means that I really do need their help. And when I call them or leave a message, they know that I've done everything that I can. They tend to not ignore that because they know that I'm only calling them as a last resort. Now, I'll give you a treatment plan hint. I know this isn't a treatment plan course, but for scaling and route planning, when I give them the treatment options, I always include as the last phase, I include the cost of 2 to 3 4910s, usually about a year's worth. And, some people will do 3 to 4, or they'll do 2 years worth of 4910s. But the reason I do that is so that the patient isn't surprised that we're not going to have a preventive appointment after it's all done. And it also serves as a reminder for me to talk about it with them so that they're aware it's going to be a different procedure. Now, ideally, the clinician has also had that conversation. So when I bring it up, it actually makes sense to them and it correlates with what they were hearing from the clinician. All right. What about these conversations? These are the fun ones. All right. But my insurance says I can't get it done. My insurance said so. All right. So let's be honest here because we have a lot more things that we want to say, but we're not going to do that. So what I typically do is I go, oh, I know here. I know it seems that way. So I'm commiserating with them. What we hear often, what we have found, I know it seems that way, but what they're actually saying is that they're not going to pay towards it, that they're not going to release benefits towards it. So what they're really saying is that you don't have coverage for it. What they're really saying is that your employer didn't select benefits for it. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm making sure that they realize where the issue really is. It's not the fact that we prescribe treatment. That's what we do. The fact is that the benefits aren't going to kick in for that treatment. And that's really unfortunate, but it really is a function of the employer selecting that plan. Or if it's an individual plan, the employee selecting that plan. Maybe they could do a better job of shopping for that individual plan. Open season's going on right now, and you can always switch plans. So what I'm saying here, and let me go back to the script here. Me and you, and this is us talking to the patient and clinicians. Don't be afraid to be very blunt, look them in the eye and say, me and you, we're the only ones that should really decide how to proceed with your treatment. The fact is, if they don't allow benefits for it, that doesn't mean that you didn't need the treatment. It just means your plan is more restrictive than others. You see how I did that? Finances are a factor for many patients. Jean's really good at helping patients figure out their options. So that is for you clinicians. I'd rather you, instead of getting into the financial nitty gritty and getting into the financial options, kick it up to your financial coordinator so that he or she can take care of that. In my office, Jean was the bomb. She was able to handle these all the time. And I always was able to, if I was running out of time or if I was pressed, I could always say, you know what, Jean knows this stuff inside out. She's going to help you figure out arrangements for it. And that's how we worked really well as a team. But when they say to me, well, my insurance says I can't get this done, I don't listen to that because that's them asking for permission to stop because they saw that from the carrier. They're hoping, and inside, they're hoping that you're going to say, well, it's not really that important. I guess we can wait until next year. But it is that important, or you wouldn't have brought it up in the first place. And so remember, just because they deny it from a benefit standpoint doesn't mean that clinically it wasn't necessary. I know you know that, but that's the message that needs to come across to the patient, and it needs to come from everybody in the office. All right, so let's talk about other difficult conversations that we have. And these, I could come up with these all day because I've just heard so many from all of you. And maybe we have an open house type webinar where we just kind of bombard each other with all these crazy scenarios where patients ask these questions. That would be kind of fun. But we do get crazy questions that we just didn't see coming. And so I wanted to give you some of my pet peeves. These are the ones where I just, I would do a deep sigh. They didn't even see the deep sigh because you have to hide it, right? But I would always go, oh, here we go again. But here, this already probably made you go, really, again? Because you're at the end of the day, you don't have to listen to this stuff, right? All right, the old office always. The old office always did this. The old office always did that. The old office never had a problem with me coming 15 minutes late for my appointment, blah, 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 blah. You know how it goes. So your attitude towards this is you're going to be friendly because, yeah, that's nice, but you're going to be firm because that's not how we do things around here. So I want to make this as convenient as possible, but we also have guidelines to follow. Oh, I wish we could do that as well, but we have guidelines we have to follow. Really, what patients are doing is expressing their displeasure, but they're going to be really surprised if you actually acquiesce to what they're saying. They know that you have policies and procedures in place. This is them just kind of pushing back a little bit. Stand your ground, stay firm. This is your office, not theirs. You have to live with this. You have to deal with patients day in and day out. They will get with the program. And if they don't get with the program, I have to tell you that sometimes those squeaky wheels are not worth it. Now, that all goes out the window if they're family or friends of the doctors. That's a whole different webinar. But for the most part, patients do go along with what you have to do, what your guidelines are in the office. So, and COVID gave us a lot of good excuses. COVID gave us almost the reset in our practice where we could decide to have new financial guidelines, new appointment guidelines, all sorts of things. And so everybody else is using COVID. Why wouldn't you? But quite frankly, when it comes to finances, COVID has changed a lot. COVID has changed the way a lot of you have looked at your accounts receivable, the way that you look at benefits, the way that you look at participation. And so COVID did make a difference. So don't be afraid to use it. This is a language that everyone will understand. So we've had to make so many changes since COVID came on the scene. They're going to understand that. Good example on this is, what about this? Have you probably heard this? This used to cause me all sorts of heartburn. I'll just pay you after insurance pays, because that's what I used to do, right? Sally, who worked here before you, Sally was here years before you were. She always let me do that. I had to deal with that. It wasn't Sally, but it was another chick. So this is where I put on my smile. And I say, I wish we could still do it that way, but it's just not possible anymore. Our accountant showed us how it didn't work for us during the pandemic. And so we've had to make some changes. I wish we could do it that way. We really had some lessons to learn from COVID, and we did have to make some changes in our guidelines. You're saying that confidently because, quite honestly, look around everywhere you go, the grocery store, the restaurants, the travel, everything's more expensive and everything's more rigid. There's no reason why you shouldn't be, because quite frankly, this is a business decision, not an emotional decision, right? So we'll always provide our best estimate to you so there won't be any surprises, because really the patient, once you get that out of the way the first time, they shouldn't be surprised that they have to pay you at the time of service, but perhaps it slipped through the cracks. So you're letting them know, okay, well, we know it used to be that way, but we've had to change things. Our accountant has asked us to change things up. We've had to change our guidelines because of everything that's going on with the economy. The economy is giving us a great excuse now. Everybody's having to change things up with all this inflation. And so that's where you're going to say, from here on out, this is how we have to have our guidelines. I'm happy to send you an email with a link to pay the bill. I'm happy to text you a link to pay the bill. I'm happy to make this as easy as possible. You can even print up the statement for them and give them a return envelope, stick a stamp on that return envelope and give it to them. But I'm not going to let them walk out thinking it's okay to wait until the insurance pays their portion, because we need cash flow. And if you let the patient do this over and over again, you're training them. So you really don't have anybody else to blame but yourself if you let them do this a couple times. We need to nip this in the bud. And now is a great time to start that. This is definitely one of those conversations where you do have to practice it because you will stumble over your words. This, I will tell you, was probably the hardest thing because I had to take my old office from paying after the time of service or paying after the insurance, and even doing like $10 a month payments. I had to take my office into this whole prepay or pay at the time of service situation. So I had many, many conversations like this. I did fumble a lot. The more confident I got, the better I was at it. And quite frankly, I got so I would just say it. And there was really no more along with it because that became truly our guideline. And that was just you communicating the guideline, not communicating a change. Communicating a change always gives you a little bit of uncertainty because you're afraid there's going to be some pushback. But communicating your guideline, you get better at that.
Hey,
So,
Teresa, before we go on, thank you so
yeah,
much.
yes.
Real quick, I want to encourage people to start asking their questions now because we're going to have in a few minutes, we're going to have Q&A. And so if you've got questions, put them in the Q&A field now so that way we can get to them when we have the allocated time. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Okay, so what do we do if we have a patient that is just too difficult? Well, you know what? I'm going to give you permission here. I'm going to give you permission to dismiss a bad patient, a patient that you feel is not in sync with your office and is giving you more trouble than they're worth. And we all know these patients, right? So it's really kind of sad when you think about your best patients. It takes you a little bit longer to compile that list because the really rotten ones stick out the most. If I asked you right now your 3 worst patients, I guarantee you've got it right now, but I'm done. You've already compiled them in your mind. But if you had to come up with your 3 best patients, you had to think a little bit. And then you'd be like, oh, but wait, we have so-and-so that came in before because you're only thinking recently. Well, guess what? That's what happens with your bad patients. The real sore thumbs stick out. Prune them, get them out of your office if they really are truly causing an issue. So let me give you some reasons when I would boot patients. And I will say admittedly that my tolerance level is much lower than it used to be. Maybe I'm just getting old and cranky, but any kind of disrespect that's shown to the team, to the doctor, to me, is that patient needs to go. And honestly, if they're friends or family, this is when we have a really strong talk with the owner or the manager, because none of your employees deserve to be treated in any kind of manner. Female employees, more so than not, than male employees will typically have 1 or 2 patients that have come to mind that have made inappropriate comments or anything like that. A lot of times, both genders will have issues with bullying from patients and maybe talking down to them and even cursing, any kind of physical contact. That's a heck no. They need to go. Any kind of threatening. And I remember talking to one office and they said, yeah, we had a patient who threatened to come back with a gun. And, should we dismiss that patient? Yes. Oh my gosh, dismiss the patient and call the cops. I mean, that's just, we're too nice sometimes. And we have to protect our employees. That's part of what we do as managers and business owners. They really are a precious resource. And so we have to let our employees know that we're going to be on their side. And so any kind of harassment, they're gone. They're out of there. What about a patient that I send to collections? Yeah, get out of there. Send them a termination letter. For all of these people, send them a termination letter and write off that balance and just get them out the door. Make sure that you put flags on their accounts, inactivate them, put flags on their accounts so that if they call for another appointment, people know, there's a big red cross that'll pop up. They need to not be rescheduled. What about those that just refuse to adhere to office guidelines? This is where it's really a good idea for you to have standard operating procedures in a manual so that you will not have any questions on whether or not you treated this patient unfairly. And right now we're living in a time where, masks are becoming contentious. There's all sorts of things that are contentious nowadays in our offices. And and it really doesn't matter how you feel about it because we all have different opinions on it. But if that is truly your office guideline and it's part of your SOPs, the patient wears a mask. It really is an issue of a patient not adhering to your guidelines, and you have to decide whether or not you want to put up with that. And also another thing too, I mean, it goes the other way. There are lots of situations where sometimes it just goes the other way. I don't want to belabor the point, but also this comes clinically. What if a patient is consistently refusing to move forward with treatment that you really feel is life-threatening or is very important, and you've collaborated, maybe you see a disease process happening in front of you. Perhaps you're uncomfortable keeping that patient on board because you're afraid that you're going to have some liability. Then you definitely need to dismiss them and refer them to either a specialist or refer them back to their physician. Now, I'm going to just caveat all of that with, I am not a lawyer, and you really should check your state guidelines when it comes to dismissing patients. A lot of times your state dental societies will have checklists and to-dos on how to do this properly and legally and ethically too. We can't forget that. We have to make sure we're doing that ethically. But don't be afraid to get rid of bad seed patients. I can tell you it gets easier, and you will be grateful faster the better you get at it. All right, so we are going to have some conversations and some demos, and I'll take some questions, but I wanted you to know that if you wanted to listen to more management, industry news, insurance information, I have 2 podcasts that are available for you, and feel free to follow me on social media. Let me give you this real quick here. These are my links for social media. Again, there's the QR code that I guess didn't work, and you can sign up for my newsletter. The freshest one just dropped today, actually. Has all information about insurance. So if you're really interested in that, sign up for my newsletter. You can find that on my website.
So Teresa, thank you so much for a wonderful program. Really appreciate it. Everyone stay safe and healthy. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.